Okay, I'm so glad that we're finally doing this. Like, we're finally sitting down and like chatting.
I know.
We've been like working together for some time now, and I always know that you're a mom of 2 boys, and we never like chatted through that. Like, being a BCBA, we're kind of in 2 different spaces. So like, I'm excited to hear.
There's a lot.
I guess from the beginning, but
Yeah.
like, do you mind if I ask you a personal question?
No,
Because I am like, some of these questions like we go through when I do assessments and things like that, and I ask people, I ask moms, we get into a lot of what's been, symptomatic and things like that in their, what they've noticed, what goes on in their household and things like that. But just to chat with a colleague and ask, it's not like something that I usually like pried into. So, I appreciate that you're like giving me opportunity to
I'm
get
excited.
to know a little bit more. So as a mom of 5 boys and, chaos that comes along with that, and you being a mom,
Yes.
I feel like we could connect over just, what was life like in the beginning before you realized maybe I need help?
Yeah.
Like maybe something is not in line with like the typically developing child here.
So, and we have 4 kids. The first one, when he was born, he was very typical, didn't have any issues or anything. And then with the second pregnancy, there were triplets. So they were newborn. They were preemies, So when they were in the NICU, I had a girlfriend that just kind of went through all this, right? Not triplets, but she just went through the preemie like issues. And so she was like,
she only had one,
but he was in the NICU for like 3-4 weeks. And so she kind of prepped me and was like, all these things are going to happen. And when early intervention calls you to check on the babies, don't blow them off. She said, it's kind of like your mom, a bear instinct takes over, and you want to be like,
I'm good. Right. I don't need you.
So literally when they called, I did that. I was like, they're fine, everything's good.
Right.
And she started to ask, well, are they meeting all their milestones? And I was like, I think so.
How many weeks were they when they were born?
They were 6 weeks early.
Oh, wow.
So
you got pretty far.
Yes, I did. Yeah. So triplets typically go to 32. I went to 34. So they were all very happy. They were only in the NICU for like 3-4 weeks. So they did good, but they were delayed in their milestones. So I was like, okay. So I had them come out and evaluate one. And the first boy, he qualified for lack of delay in communication. And I was like, he's only a couple months old. I didn't even know what that meant. Right. Like, he doesn't communicate because he doesn't talk yet. What does that mean? And then they did the evaluation and showed me, like, he should be pointing, he should be doing this. And I was like, oh. So I said, well, let's get the other one tested. The other boy, he tested. He qualified as well for services. And I was like, wow, okay, let's get the girl tested at this point. So now she qualified. So all 3 of them were receiving services at home. So I was thankful for that. We had, I think, one therapist coming out and doing PT, OT.
So you started like really early, like off the bat.
And that honestly, but it was because my girlfriend said when they call, don't blow them off. So that would be my advice to anyone. If you have a preemie or if you even suspect anything, there are services out there that you don't even know about. So
many of the signs, like you were saying, like you don't even know to think are even challenges for development at such a young age. But, so much about what we learn over time is that the sooner you support the development, the better off the child is in the long run.
Yeah. So we went from early intervention. They stayed in the whole time. And then when they turned 3, that's when they said, no, we'll transition over to the school. So we called our local school. We met with the child study team, went through all of their evaluations. And at that point, my daughter wasn't qualifying anymore, but the 2 boys still were. So they went into the special needs preschool program.
Did you continuously have concerns at that point at home?
I did. And I kept, and even that whole time through early intervention, I kept saying, I feel like something's wrong. I feel like something's wrong. And my mama kept telling me, like, just be persistent. Don't give up. And sure enough, when we finally met with the child study team, it was the school psychologist that said, I think you should see a neurologist to rule out autism. So at that point we knew. I was like, okay. So set the appointment up. We got the confirmation they were both on the autism spectrum. The one also had oppositional defiance disorder. So
Okay.
that
So could you tell me more about that? Because I know that that's, as a mom, like
so yeah. So
a part you might want to go on to a
yeah.
tangent.
So 4 kids. You know, I've got a 2-year-old and then I have newborn triplets. Life was stressful, but literally I said to everyone, I would take any of that any day of the week over the one child with oppositional defiance disorder. That blew me away. I was not prepared for that. I didn't go to school for that. I always said, I went to school for marketing. I don't know how to do this. I don't want to learn it. I'm not capable. This is not for me. It's not what I signed up for.
Right.
So thanks.
That part of being a mom is just, that's not the rosy side of it. And I feel like there's so many instincts that come along with being a mom, but to respond to your child when they're not engaging in the natural form of communication is so challenging. And to say like, this child is good. Children are inherently good. And they just want to communicate with their mom. And that's what it really is. And it's so hard to see it like that in the moment.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
I mean, kudos to you.
No, I'll never forget one time I was buckling everyone into car seats, and the one with the ODD was freaking out, and I couldn't figure out why. And I looked down and I saw he was holding a bowl of Cheerios. And once all of the Cheerios settled and they were on the perimeter of the bowl again, he was calm as could be. And I was like, he doesn't understand. He couldn't communicate to me that he was upset because his Cheerios were a mess. And once they settled to where they had to be, he was perfect.
And that's not something that anyone that wouldn't have been you would have been able to pinpoint in that moment. And I think that that's something that's the mom. Like, the mom could get that. And do you think that I guess, summarizing the ODD in that moment is really the defiance is a scream for communication and help? Is that so? Sometimes when we as clinicians present that to moms, it's not always received in a way that they see that we're getting them, that we get it, right?
Yeah, no, I see that, because I felt like when I would have these professionals come into the house to help me, I would just be breaking down saying, I need help. I can't even go to Target. Like, I can't do. And when I would say that to the professionals, they're like, it's not about going to Target. It's about this specific goal. And I'm like, no, it's about being able to live life and go to Target like normal people do. And then once they explain to me, no, it's about the behavior that we're seeing and how to control that and divert that. And that's how you can get to Target successfully. Okay.
It's the smaller pieces. It's one dinner that we complete feeling like we're ready for bedtime and I'm not crashing into bed now. It's the smaller pieces of success that are saying, oh, I feel like I understand what he's trying to convey to me now. Now I feel more confident to go to Target.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because it was true. Once I realized that he needed that calm, he needed that he needed everything to be his way, but he couldn't tell me that. And once I finally understood that, then life became much easier and much more controllable for everyone.
And the Target example is great because also from a bigger picture of support, we work towards that goal, but there's so much more that goes on in Target than in your kitchen during dinner or breakfast, right? There's so many more, uncontrollable stimuli there that you can't, expect might occur. Even just the lighting and the way the background noise and the music going on. I mean, just those are basics that before you even got started there. And so that's when they're trying to say, we need to teach these skills in a different setting where they're going to be more successful, and then generalize that to those spaces makes so much more sense. But I appreciate that you're sharing that, yes, you recognize that it is just all about communication at the end of the day, because it's, something that we know, but then not always, received on the same level, because, and I think that's the difference between, us learning it and learning it as we gain experience in our careers and as our experience grows and we see like, hold on, I'm a BCBA for some time now. You know, when I was a younger BCBA, I might have been a little bit more, you know, by the book, so to speak. And then as I got to know the moms, I got to, you know, go through the parent training and support them and take their feedback into account of how I'm going to support the programming and make sure the programming really supports what they're understanding. Not always is, you know, the, I guess, feedback that moms are giving, we have to get on the same page as them, right? And so like if that mom doesn't truly understand that the ODD is really, I guess, a cry for help and the communication piece, then what else could we support mom with to show her other angles of support before we, you know, get to that point?
Right, because it'll come there eventually.
Yeah.
It'll just be on her timeline for her to understand, because everyone's different. So.
Did you have any other like opportunities, I guess, that you noticed that kind of difference between the supports that you were looking for getting and, you know?
Yeah. I would say for me, the biggest thing was understanding the behaviors and why they were happening. So for me, there were several different, like, I felt like very aha like moments. One of them would have been like the FBA. I never knew what an FBA was. Once I learned about that evaluation and why it was so important, then that made total sense to me, because I was just a mom just trying to, you know, get through the day. And I didn't understand that he had to be evaluated in several different environments and watch what his triggers were and what would set him off. And then how I loved that they would teach me how to respond, because of course all of my natural responses were wrong and I'm making everything worse because I'm responding in a way that's making him worse. So for me, it was a lot of parent training, what I needed to do to correct my behavior to help him. And also the important thing for us was catching it before it happened, because once it happened, it was all downhill, it was out of control. So seeing those things in him before the meltdown happened was huge. So being able to learn those things and see that ahead of time, that FBA was like gold for me.
Yeah. That's amazing that you as a mom were able to like appreciate that on that level.
I
and
felt like
say like, oh, this gives me the answers that I needed. I can do this now.
Right.
You know?
For sure. I wanted to like climb on top of the highest mountain and just scream out to every mom who ever had an autism diagnosis for their children, like, you need an FBA. Like, if your school doesn't offer it, like, go get one. Like, you need to learn why they're doing what they're doing, because that changes everything.
Yeah. I could go into like the elephant in the room in a sense of like ABA, but sometimes there's moms that like really opposed to it, or they have like a bad rep. It really comes sometimes in this bad rep or this bad light. And I feel like your perspective is more like saying, hold on, if you just understood why it was happening, give it that chance from that framework, right? Build the framework of just saying, okay, 1 second. Now I understand why. Now I could come into every circumstance with a different frame of mind. Okay, so what about the process now makes me feel uncomfortable versus comfortable? And how can I build a process or a program or goals that make me feel more comfortable in how we're going to go through each piece?
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that is not necessarily always recognized, that that's what we're here to do.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of parents that don't fully understand it, they think it's just going to be like this, like Pavlov's dog, like, and it's this, you're training my child to act a certain way, and we want them to be human, we want them to be genuine, and we don't want them to respond a certain way because we told them, but they don't really understand the why behind it. So I think that's really what the moms need to understand.
I think also a big part of it is realizing that some of that programming gets us to fill in subtle, smaller pieces of development that were just not developed correctly. Pieces like perspective taking, filling in the blanks, so to speak, of just general reciprocity of conversation. These could be bigger things. It doesn't mean that those things are always so small, but sometimes when we find the missing piece of a much bigger, puzzle, that really the child might have a lot of those skills, but just something subtle in the foundation of those skills
Right.
wasn't, integrated properly, I guess, it might be such a simple thing to support them with, and it gives them that aha moment of like, oh, this is making sense to me now. That's why my teacher did this, or this is why mom really doesn't like when I, and it takes time to like figure those pieces out. But then again, it doesn't have to be this difficult process of teaching it that I guess they sometimes feel like it might be.
I think it's really just a matter of them embracing it and realizing that there is help, there are professionals, and you have to listen to the professionals. You have to be able to trust them and know that they're there to help you and that they really do know what they're talking about. Because in our personal experience, everything we were doing was literally the exact opposite of what we should be doing. So once we learned that and once we saw that it would work, I was like, okay, maybe they do know what they're talking about.
What was your initial reaction to like realizing from a clinician's perspective of, maybe I should shift in how some of my responses are?
Because I would see it work. We've got these professionals coming into our house, and we're seeing meltdown after meltdown, and toys being thrown and things being broken, and my husband and I are just like, stop! What are you doing? No, yelling, screaming, time out, and none of it's working. All the things that you think are correct, with parenting, telling your child no and disciplining them, and he's turning around, he's smiling, and he's doing it even better and bigger.
Exactly.
You say the sky is blue and he says it's red, and it's just the exact opposite. And once we had the professional in the home with us, and I would watch her, and the craziest thing was ignore the bad behavior. And I was like, are you kidding me? Ignore that he's trying to kill us, or
that's such a big one things. Because also like I think it's hard to understand what does that mean to ignore it, right? It's such a big conversation in a sense of like when we say, oh, ignore the negative behavior, but don't ignore anything else about the child or what's going on, right? It's the behavior. And how do you do that still in the space of them, still connected to them, which is such a big piece of everything, staying connected through whatever is going on and the situation, but not giving additional attention to the specific behavior that they're using to communicate with you.
And that's a great point, because it is true. You're like in that moment, and also you're stressed, and you're
that is exactly right.
He's about to light someone on fire, or do something crazy, or hurt someone, and so your instinct is to just go and attack that problem. And once you have the tools and you're able to calm down and take a step back and do those things that you're taught, like redirecting, and like you said, you're engaging, you're not ignoring the child completely. Absolutely.
And you're supporting yourself, right? You're supporting yourself to realize that at this time my entire fight and flight mode is going up, not just his. And I need to support myself. I need to learn the tools to say, 1 second, in order to effectively do this, how do I look inward and say, 1 second, I'm gonna grab my water bottle that's on the side and take a drink of water quickly, take a deep breath, close my eyes for a second and reframe. Things that you're still right there, but you're also supporting yourself to say, let's go through this successfully.
Yeah, exactly. Because we've done it so wrong so many times.
I actually, when you're speaking now, it's making me remember this. Back when I was, a new BCBA, I always implemented this specific goal in a parent training sessions, and I'm curious what your thoughts are about it. I don't know that I wouldn't do it now. I just don't know that I would do it as consistently. But for pretty much every single parent, and I'll tell you the responses in a second that I got to the moms during the assessment process and when we presented it to them. But one of the goals that I always implemented for more or less every mom was engage in positive verbal reinforcement with your child at least one time per day. And I guess document at what time that one time was, and report back when we have parent training sessions how that went. I can't say some of them. Most of the times, the reactions that I got from was like, I hear the goal, I get it. What do they do correctly? what was your gut reaction when I gave that across? Like,
it's funny because I immediately flashback to IEP meetings. Like, I'm sitting there with child study team leaders, and all they're doing is telling me how great my child is.
Right.
And like, are you kidding me? Like, he's awful. He's the meanest kid in the world, and he's so bad. And all they would do is focus on the good. And I was like, and so as a parent, that was hard because I'm like, you must not have the same child that I have at home. You must be a different child. It's like, no, it was their outlook, and they're doing what you said. They're looking for the good, and that's what they're focusing on.
Right.
So
I think like after
so
a nice bunch of years doing this, I'm looking back and saying I've pretty much put in that goal into pretty much every treatment plan, and thinking back to how many moms responded that way, it really surprised me. Like, I guess that's the piece that we need to focus on in the outset of supporting the moms and supporting them and saying this is hard and this is not an easy approach to have, but to walk in and say, what did they do well today, right? And they did so much well. Yeah. That's the mind-blowing thing. Yeah. And it's not just what they did well, what they did right, something specifically in the challenge that we're having, right? In the specific behavior that we want to see get better, find something that they did on a foundational level correctly there so that you can say, I saw that you whatever it is, and reinforce that in a positive way with mom saying it. That there's nothing more of a connection for mom saying what you and noticing, pointing out what you've seen.
I think it's hard. Like, the moms are probably like, you have no idea what I go through every day. But
exactly, that was always the response. That was always the response. You must not understand what it looks like here on a day-to-day basis.
If you can't find those little moments, then you're never gonna grow as a mom, and your child is never gonna grow into that person you're trying to help them become. Yeah. So I think it's a perfect goal, and it should be there because that's what they need. But it's just so hard. But I think once the moms realize that, and I think the more that they see other people do it, and if they see a teacher can point out the positive, if this clinician can see those positives, then why can't I?
As a BCBA, looking back and that time frame when I realized, oh, you've been doing this for some time using that skill, and that was constantly the reaction. But that's from the outset how we train our BTs and RBTs to approach every session. Look at that piece, right? How do we give that same perspective to moms was just such an eye-opening piece of like, your child is good. They mean well. And,
they can't help it. I think that's the biggest thing. Once I realized that it really was out of his control, that he wasn't intentionally trying to have these behaviors and act this way, that, for us was just bad, once I realized that it wasn't intentional. And then also too, I think the whole attention-seeking behavior, that was new to me. I didn't realize how big that was. So I think just understanding, that's really...
And did you have a challenge comparing the two of them, of their differences?
Of course, absolutely.
That must have been a whole nother
and the worst part for me was that, so the one with the ODD, he was our red flag immediately because the behaviors were in your face. They were, defiant. Whereas the other one, he was totally just kind of pushed to the side because he was the quiet, he was the self-stimmer, he was the one who had more of the processing delays. So this poor kid wasn't getting any help because he wasn't lighting fires, So it was,
and it's such a fascinating thing for you to see when they say there's a spectrum. That's the spectrum.
Oh, absolutely. And
all different angles.
Totally one extreme to the other. And so it was very interesting to see that. But then also on the parent side of things, and the frustration is that, and I don't want to go down the rabbit trail of the schools and some of the parents' issues with the schools, but you have two separate children with the same diagnosis.
But that means totally different.
It means nothing, yes. And then they get the same exact IEP.
Wow.
How is that?
Right, I hear that.
I won't go down that road. But
It sounds like that was a frustrating experience.
Yeah, for sure. Because they're two totally different children, two totally different sets of behaviors.
And you're a mom that was able to see that and see the difference, but then there's moms that only have one child and they don't know that there's that same cookie cutter approach being applied, right? So you're able to see the difference. It was such a red flag for you.
Right, which is why this conversation is so important. Because the moms need to understand that just because you have an IEP doesn't mean that that's necessarily the perfect IEP for your child. Like, do the research. You know your kid better than anyone.
Well, that's what advocating is all about. Sitting, listening, understanding, learning. I had this conversation with somebody last night, right? When you sit in a conversation and there's 7 adults that are educated on this subject sitting around you, it is so overwhelming. But the one person that knows the child better than any of those people is the mom. And she needs to be able to say, I hear what you're all saying. Let's revisit this again. Let's have the conversation again. And this is what I was guiding her to say. I said, you did great in that conversation, but she left kind of feeling bullied in a sense into what the response is. Because when you have that many adults, and they weren't trying to give that message to her, she was just a mom there to support her child, and listening to so many people tell her otherwise of what her gut was saying, she was questioning herself. And that's such a hard conversation. Like, that is such a hard piece where I say, go back, say, I want a follow-up discussion and ask the questions that you wanted to ask in that moment that you weren't confident enough to ask. And she's like, but they'll do that? I said, yeah, they have to.
It is. It's definitely a learning experience. And walking into that child study room the first time, like, that is overwhelming because you have this entire table full of professionals, right? They do this for a living, 3-4 meetings a day. Like, this is all they do. And you're just a mom walking in your first time, and you feel this immense pressure that, like, what you say or don't say may or may not get your child the help that they need. So there's a lot of pressure. It's a scary moment, you know.
It's unfortunate because really everybody's on the same page and wants to support this child in the best way. But things do become systematic over time, and that's just the nature of how things evolve. And the only person that's going to support that child more than anyone who's clinically trained to do it is the mom. So that's why the questions are important, the follow-up, being involved, being part of the sessions, knowing what's happening, and asking and saying, are you sure? There's nothing more that remembering actually supporting interventions and being the BCBA in the home and supporting the mom, there was nothing more supportive to the child than the mom saying, are you sure that they can handle that level of reinforcement schedule or things like that, because then you question yourself and you're like, oh yeah, you're right. You know what? Maybe let's tweak this or tweak that or be a little more creative about this. And it's all about that, being creative to support the program with all of the different pieces that need to be navigated. I always say it, right? Like, the best clinicians are the most creative ones, which is interesting concept because we usually think that they're the ones that are more systematically following the system. But what I've seen over time is when they're more creative, they can take the black and white pieces of what are supposed to fit into the boxes, so to speak, and apply them in the most unique and impressive ways that don't look like what the initial thing looked like. And not only that, but to train their technicians to do the same. That's where I see they're the most successful.
No, I see that because I always felt like I had to almost be like a preschool teacher at home, and I wasn't ready for that, and I didn't have that mindset, and I wasn't creative in that way. But once I sort of embraced that as my challenge now, then we were much more successful at home because of.
But I think part of the BCBA's responsibility is to support you in that, not necessarily to make you feel like every little piece of being a preschool teacher is what needs to be translated into your day-to-day, making dinner, breakfast, serving dinner, getting kids into the bath, spending time with them and just relaxing. All of those pieces have to come along with a natural organic sense of being a mom and supporting them with the background of whatever the intervention is and the plan is in a creative way where it's not just, oh, we are following the chart right now. Sometimes that's what it turns into. And I think that tends to turn into a little bit of a struggle where, oh, I didn't give the checks. It becomes, one second, how can we be more creative to embed it into the framework of our life naturally, where it's meant to be here and it stays here because that's what they need,
Because that's what the moms are going to remember. That's what the kids are going to remember. And I think that's why they fight the ABA therapy so much, because it seems so robotic and so planned out.
Exactly.
And how could I do this on my own if I don't have the clinician with me everywhere I go? So it's about being creative and how to use that in everyday life. So I think that's
and I think that it did shift drastically. Like over the years, I've watched a lot of the implementation shift into a lot more of that. Back when I always loved the natural environment teaching kind of framework more. And I always found myself to be more successful at that. And then to see over the years where, a lot of the programming and teaching actually turns into much more of a natural sense, even within a classroom setting or even within a teacher, student, BT, student setting, it's still turned into this very natural, way of including skills, including goals, things like that. And it's nice to see that because that was, something that I always was inclined to say, hold on, this just feels more right. And I see across the board that did become more of a way of implementing,
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely.
Did you see any sort of progression over time?
It changed every year, I think.
Did it really?
Because and there are so many different phases. So we started off with early intervention. They would come to the house. It was great. We would have one great therapist, and then she would leave, and then I'd get someone else. So it's all about that connection. So we have to make sure they get the right person. We did have one we fell in love with, and she worked with us at home, in the schools, and out in the community. So that was like our perfect storm. Like when we had her coming out. And I connected because she was a mom also. So I'd be like, wait, so you do this with your kids at home? And she didn't have kids on the spectrum, but she had young kids. So she was like, yeah. But what I loved is that she would be like, but I don't always do it right. Sometimes I'm tired and sometimes I mess up. And that's okay. Just because I know what to do doesn't mean I always do it. So that was helpful for me because I didn't have that pressure anymore. I was like, okay, I'm allowed to make some mistakes. I can mess up.
100%. We are all human. And, I come to PTA sometimes and I'm listening and I'm chatting with the teachers and I don't share with them what I do because I feel like then I sound like the one that's,
on the other side of the table.
Yeah. And I just try to, share and go naturally through it. And I say, when I start realizing and I look back and I know how to see the situations and take a step back and say, what is this child trying to tell me? What is, the environment need from me right now? Or who can I ask to step in to support me, which is such a big piece. I don't think that I can do this alone right now when it's at a certain point, and you just say, hold on, this is being human and this is being a mom. It's not always going to be perfect, right? And it's figuring out within that moment, being creative to say, how do I keep the calm? How do I keep the learning going, which is part of it. It's always learning. It's always a learning experience. And at the same time, not fall apart doing it.
Absolutely.
Did you feel like besides for specifically, let's say, ABA therapy, was there anything else that kind of supported you in the years as a mom or with the kids?
So I would say the parent training was huge. The second thing that was huge for us was we hired a special ed consultant to go into the classroom and observe the current IEP and settings we were getting. Once they saw that, that's when they said, school's not doing enough for you. They sent them out of district, and that's when they got the ABA. That's when they started to get all of the help they really needed.
Right.
So once we did those couple things really started to change. Then at home, the more we stuck with it, because you said so many times, we need the parents to buy into it, because it has to be across the board. It can't just be me coming into your house every couple hours, throughout the week. Like, everyone has to buy into this. Once we and getting my husband on board too, like that's hard. Like
I could imagine.
Moms are usually okay, but it's the dads is like, my kid's not riding that little yellow bus. My kid's not going to special ed. My kid's not. And once you get that on board, and things really starting to change.
Yeah, and I guess that's also part of not just the home setting, but communicating and being in touch with the schools and collaborating. If you didn't feel that we were on the same page, so you kept saying something's not moving here, we're not going down this road together. And then as soon as you said, hold on, I got to take care of something on my own here, send in the child study team on your own and say, 1 second. Okay, now we're on the same page, and now there's a tremendous amount of progress happening. Such a drastic difference. Wow.
For sure.
And it's amazing because we always say this, but to look and talk to a mom 19 years down the road who sees the big picture and says, this is what happened and this is the road we went down, and it's all true. Like this is what you need to know to be successful.
Sure. And
it's
what
so
I
powerful.
kept hearing over and over again was that I had to fight for those services when they were younger, because they're like little sponges. They need all the therapy they can get while they're young, because that's when they need it. So I fought, and I would fight for services I didn't even know if they needed. But I said, if I read about it and I heard that it had good results, I was like, I went into the child study team. I said, this is what we need. And
advocating. There's nothing like it.
So that's what I want all the moms to know. I want all the moms to know they're not alone. It's okay to fight, and it's okay to not fight too. Like, sometimes you can give up and you can just take the day and just have your little meltdown for yourself and start again the next day, or even the next year. Because like 1 year was great, the next year the teachers weren't so great, or so you're going to go through seasons, and just stick with it.
That's such a powerful point. It's not always going to be perfect, as long as it's not harming and going backwards. Sometimes just being in that moment and not stressing the whole team out in that like fight mode is, saying, okay, we'll have another teacher's assistant next year that's not going to be, or we'll have a different teacher, or we'll have a different, technician. And the constant change and saying, well, this is not right and this is not right, and is not always as beneficial as we think it is. So taking in a big picture, taking in the 19 years of what it takes to get there, saying it's not just going to be tomorrow.
Baby steps.
Baby steps. Amazing. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that you were vulnerable to share this.
Thank you.